So why should you never get married? It's quite an unusual question to ask because when people come to astrologers, they usually ask, when will I get married? And I feel like the question of marriage troubles a lot of us, and it's still something our society aspires to do. And it's like a progress of life where most of us are expected to get married sooner or later. Although in the individualistic societies, it tends to be a bit of different, and many people just decide to live together and never get married. But I think as a society we're still preoccupied with the question of marriage. Um, Even look at the same-sex marriages. It was very important to have the legal grounds to actually do so, to be together as a legal couple. And I feel like some of it is obviously complications of our legal system and the fact that, you know, having banking accounts and joint banking accounts and selling, buying property, it's much easier sometimes when you are a married couple. Nevertheless, I feel like it's also a part of a social conditioning. Even back in the day, when the kids were born to unmarried couple, they always kind of held the title of being a bastard. So, you know, marriage is still on the mind of many of us, and it implies also meeting this significant other, the one who's going to be the one. It's kind of settling down. It's not so much about probably about signing the papers for most of us, but about just the idea of knowing, the having a certainty that, yeah, I have found the one. This is the area of my life that is now taken care of. So why some of us should never get married? I think you all probably heard this kind of stories of some people who keep getting married and then something will always happen. They will either get a divorce or something would happen to their wife or husband, and then we used to call it, in the folk beliefs, we used to call it like somebody is being cursed. And I had a personal story of this where a friend of my parents actually got married 3 times, and every time, not long after the marriage, his wife would die. And first it was a coincidence, but then, like, they thought it was a coincidence, but then after a short time, he thought he's kinda cursed. So then much later, in his older years, he met another woman and they started living together, but he decided to never make it official for that very reason. But then time came that they wanted to buy a house or do something with property. Again, same legal reasons. So they thought like, well, what the hell, we'll just sign the papers. And it's been many years, so he thought like, you know, this is the thing with the folk beliefs, because they're not backed up by any kind of science or consistency behind them. It's like, it's very easy to stop believing in them because it's like, you know, maybe just a coincidence, right? Whereas with astrology, it's a bit different. You know, if it's written in your natal chart, if it's written in the stars, like, you know, it's there. It's not gonna go anywhere. So, well, he decided to marry her for that reason. So they did marry, and then few months later, basically she never woke up in the morning, and then the doctors came and they didn't say it was a heart attack. And the thing is, she wasn't that old. She was about 50, and she didn't have any, like, you know, major health concerns. So that was like, her death was kind of quite a shock, but also a confirmation for him that he is somehow cursed. After that, he became heavily depressed, and he still is to an extent. I can say it really broke his life in a way. So how to avoid this kind of things? Because I wouldn't say that some people are cursed, but in astrology there is this thing as a non-marriage aspects. Something that will prevent you of being in a marriage. And even if you do get in a marriage, something will always happen. And doesn't mean that it has to be like death to that extent. I guess maybe that's the influence of Pluto there, but I mean in his chart. But more often, it's just, you know, endless divorces and and yeah, and just things not working out. And sometimes people experience that of everything being amazing before they got married, but then after they got married, everything went wrong. So there is this amazing video that I watched yesterday, and it just makes so much sense about how to calculate your percentage of non-marriage. And why is it important to know? It's because sometimes we go against ourselves following the path of the society to get married just because it's something that is, you know, has been so much socially conditioned, something that is a respectable thing to do. We do that to satisfy our parents or our friends even. People who always ask like, oh, you've been together in a relationship for how many years? Are you guys getting married? So, you know, this kind of things happen all the time, and often we go against ourselves and do sign the papers. So I think knowing this can make you more, you know, sure about that this is what you're feeling. It's not that you don't want to marry this person, because you may love this person very much, but it's just that being in a marriage will not work out for you. And it doesn't mean that your relationship can't work as the conventional marriage does work. You can still live together, do everything, you know, have children, have the same household. It's not about that so much, it's about just not having on the papers. So how to calculate your non-marriage percentage coefficient? So there is two things you need to look at: the moon and the Venus. The moon. The moon, if it's mutable, so if it's in Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo or Pisces, that gives you a 50% of non-marriage percentage. Then the second condition, if your moon is in cadent house. So cadent houses are the houses of each last quarter of the zodiac. So it would be 3rd, 6th, 9th and 12th house. So if your moon is in any of this, so if it's either in a mutable sign or if it's in one of the cadent houses, you get 50%. If it's in both, so say my moon is in Virgo actually, so I get 50% as well, but it's not in one of the houses. But say if it was in a 3rd house, then for me it would mean that I'll have 100%. Alright. So then the second thing you look at is Venus. So the Venus is, the same thing applies. So if your Venus is in mutable signs, so that is being Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces or Virgo, or if it's in the cadent house, so if it's in the 3rd, 6th, 9th or 12th house, then you get another 25% for each. So if each of these conditions applies for Venus, you get an extra 25%. So that way, say for example, if you have all of these conditions, you can have 150% of non-marriage aspect. And generally, you should not get married if you want to say save the relationship or have a happier life, if your coefficient is higher than 100%. So if it's 100, 125 or 150, then yeah. If it's under 100, so for example if it's 75, it may be difficult, right? Like 50 as well. 25 is, I wouldn't say it would, you know, matter so much, but 50, 75, it will make it harder, but it's something you can overcome, right? It might manifest itself in, say, you know, having a bit of a unconventional marriage, or just, you know, having hardships in marriage, but doesn't mean there's going to be a divorce involved, or doesn't mean there is something that cannot be worked with. Whereas when it's 100 or 125 or 150, it's like, you know, there is it's basically a straight road to failure, and you would want to avoid that, especially if there is someone you love dearly and you You want them in your life, and you want them in your life probably, till the end of your days. And you wouldn't want to, ruin it just by signing the papers and activating that kind of destiny karmic mode that has been imprinted in your natal chart. Nonetheless, people who have 100, 125%, 150, or even 75, 50, a lot of times they themselves don't feel like getting married. And if they're really in touch with their true self and their feelings, the chances are they would probably not go ahead and get married. So another thing, speaking of marriages, which is important to look at, is your 7th house. And although people say the 7th house is more relationship house and 9th house is house of marriage, I still follow the 7th house rule. And depending what the sign is of your 7th house. So for me, the 7th house is on the cusp of Aquarius. So Aquarius is the sign of, actually, it's first of all, it's an air sign. So it wants a lot of freedom. It's not the traditional type, it's unconventional. Aquarius is all about, shading away from traditions. It's been different, extraordinary, out of ordinary. So I wouldn't be surprised if I was to get married, it would be something, a very different kind of marriage relationship. And right now, from having some experience of getting into a relationship, breaking up and all these things, and being in another relationship right now, I can say that, when I think of even the concept of living together and of marriage itself, I feel like, for me personally, I think I would love to, be with someone and even maybe one day get married to someone, but to live in different houses. I really like the idea of it because I feel like, when you have children it might get complicated, but, who said that you will have children? And who said that the next step to take as well? I'm not sure if I would feel like it. Like eventually I might, but even then, I just like this idea of having a personal space. And even when I used to be in relationships before and live with my partners, I always used to have my own room. So we would live in a house or an apartment, and they will have their own room and I'll have my own room. Although in some societies and in some families, or even for some people who have very traditional values and a lot of Taurus, Cancer influence in their chart, for them that would be unthinkable. That would be something like, you guys don't love each other. And this is another thing actually about the 7th house. So say if you have your North Node, so if Rahu is in your 7th house, that means that your karma is basically to get married and to be in a relationship, and that is very unfortunate. If, for example, say you have this non-marriage aspect, which is 100 or 125 or 150, and then your karma is to get married. That is like, it's a great struggle because you would probably want to get married. And to be happy, you should, according to your karma, you have to get married, but at the same time, it makes it impossible to stay in a marriage and be happy in a marriage because of these non-marriage aspects. So another thing to note, if the 7th house is in Cancer or Taurus, so Cancer is motherhood, and its ruler is the moon, and it's very taking care and homey and setting up a household. So you would probably naturally have a craving for getting married, having a household, having children and things like this. And same to do with Taurus. Taurus, and I would say Libra too, to an extent, because Libra is all about partnerships. But Libra is more of an air sign. So although they need a partner in their life, but I feel like it doesn't have to be a partner in a romantic sense. It can be somebody who is friend or close relative, somebody who will always be with them and keep them company, because they're very dependent and Of course, I had to say that because I'm an Aries, and yeah, and I always oppose myself to Libras, but nothing bad about Libras, and it's just I see it right now myself as well, of me kind of being at home, and my mom actually, she has a lot of Libra in her. So with me, when I go places and do things, I'm very independent, and even I leave the house, I don't ask like, oh, do you wanna come with me? Because I'm like, why would you? You got your own things to do. Like, why would you wanna come to the shop with me, right? Like, unless you want something. And her, and she would be like, why you never ask me? And then she would always ask me, and she would always want to tag along. But I don't think it's like in a bad way. It's just because they always want some company. They always want to be with someone. Um, yeah, so that's that. So if that will be in the seventh house, they would probably want to have a partner in their life. But then again, you don't have to get married for that. Whereas a Taurus, it's a bit different. Taurus usually have of course, it depends on the bigger picture and the natal chart, itself. But Taurus are very traditional, and the idea of living together and not being married, I don't think it excites them so much. So that is something to be aware of. And I feel like this is the kind of positions that is hard to deal with, but it's good to know these things. It's good to know and maybe prevent a lot of these things, because I can see over and over again people are following the given path of the society of getting married, and then the marriages are failing. And I'm experiencing it firsthand right now as well, being back in my home country and being of certain age. So I'm still in my early, mid-20s, but I keep getting asked, are you married? Are you having kids? Like by relatives and friends of relatives. It's something that is so much on the table, that is like, what are you doing with your life, basically? And I feel like it's to a certain extent a lot different in the West. But then again, when I look at it and I think about it, it depends where. And it depends on the person as well. I have a lot of friends who live in the West, who are from there, and yet they wouldn't ask this thing and then understand that, some of us are career orientated, but yet for them it's something very important. It's an important step in their life. It's the next progression. So I think, whether you want to get married or not, you should be very mindful why you're doing it for. And sometimes when you really, really love the person and you want to be with them, signing the papers is not everything.